Hello, Mr. Stephen Benedict.
How are we doing, Keith?
Good. How are you, my friend?
Well, thank you for the very in-depth intro.
We like to entertain and inform, as I say here in the lab, not just inform and bore. Where do you join us here today from?
I'm in California.
Born and raised.
No, East Coast, born and raised, New Jersey area.
So now we've set the seed for a journey and story of Stephen's life. So that seed was planted in Jersey.
Yes. Yeah, very early. Moved up and down around the East Coast for countless amounts of years until I was adopted at the age of 8, and along with my brother, 8 and 6.
Where were you living on the East Coast when you were adopted?
Originally, we were in Union City, which is a very small city down south a little bit. And then after we were adopted, we moved from Randolph, which was even more south. And then we moved up towards Fort Lee. Fort Lee is the first town across the George Washington Bridge. You have to go through Fort Lee in order to get to New York. So that's where we were adopted. That's where we laid our roots and were raised by two great individuals and put us on the map, so to say.
But you said you were adopted at 8, yet your story truthfully starts much sooner than that.
Yeah, there's a lot there that happened in that. I like to say that my childhood started at 8. I would say my pre growth period to becoming an adult started from very early to about 8. So all those kind of those nuances of building resilience and self-sufficiency and self-protective mechanisms, they were all built beforehand. Just a little backstory on that. We were living in and out of motel rooms when we were younger. We didn't have a stable life situation. My mother was unstable. My father died when I was 2. I have no recollection of him whatsoever. We have gotten several different stories on that. That can be talked at a little later. But then my mother started dating another man, and he saw fit to lay out his frustrations on us whenever it was feasible for him. So it was a lot of abuse and neglect and a lot of drugs and alcohol going on in that situation. As I said, we were living in and out of motel rooms, and it went on for quite a while until my grandparents found out about the situation, and they decided to take us in for a very short period of time. Obviously, 2 elderly adults trying to take care of 2 toddlers is really unstable and insufficient for them. So our next best bet was to go into foster care. Mind you, that at this point, this was my second time in foster care. I was put in foster care at roughly the age of 4 months. And that was the same thing with my mother. It was just very unstable. Then I was put back into her hands. And then my brother was born. And that's when the whole second chapter of the story kind of came around. And like I said, we were put back into foster care, moved up and down around the East Coast for 6 years, 6, 7 years. And we were finally blessed to be adopted by 2 great individuals. My mother was a second grade teacher. My father was an ex-Marine, fought in the Vietnam War, then moved on to working in the New York Stock Exchange. So that was like our initial space of having a second chance at life, is what I like to say.
Yeah. Then you go on to that second chance in life and you have a very successful athletic career, Stephen.
Yeah, a lot of things opened up. I was exposed to a lot of things, and I use that word exposure very heavily. And I think that's a very important word for all of us, is exposure. And my parents were great at that. My mother, especially, 2 great dynamics. My mother being very strong and a bold woman, involved in everything, super protective of us, an aspect in which we didn't have when we were younger. And my father really being the joy of life and having that aspect of just loving the day to day, loving to spend time with us, very family oriented, and just was, we called he had a white beard, looked like Kenny Rogers, but everybody around Christmas time would think he was Santa Claus. So he got asked to be Santa Claus. But Their dynamic was especially important to our growth and our just well-roundedness. My parents got us into everything from sports to music to art to education. So it was really laid the foundation for us to really plant some good seeds to grow and to really become move in a different trajectory than what we were going
Mhm.
from when we were younger. And sports playing a very big part. My first sport was I was put into judo. I did martial arts for 10 years. I loved it. It laid the foundation of all of my discipline and all of my due diligence and my focus and commitment and just laying a baseline for things to bounce off of.
I would suggest to you that that baseline was set even earlier, as you share with me that your
Mhm.
father was in the military, your mother gave you immense love. You needed two people to wrap around you some love, some structure and system and set you free, right?
Without a doubt, yes, and that's very true. We needed the components that what we weren't getting
Yeah.
watered with when we were younger,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
those are super crucial in growth mechanisms for children. They need the love, they need the security, they need the support, they need the constant affirmations and things like that in order to know that they're moving in the right direction and they're in an environment in which they're able to grow. We weren't in that. It was more of my previous environment was more of me having to be this father figure for my younger brother, which I had no capabilities to do and I
Mhm.
had no rights to do. But I was thrown into it, so I had no choices. So having to be self-protective and be super aware of my surroundings, having trust problems, being a really good listener into what people are saying and how people reacted and what my environment looks like. Like those all things are things that are not really that they're not really that honed in on as children, right? We're more free, willing, go lucky, enjoy being a child, have recess play and stuff like that, do that type of stuff. Like that is a child's environment, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Not having to worry about that other stuff because they're handed over to our parents.
Mhm.
So that was handed to me. So it was a very accelerated childhood. And then it was like acceleration for those first 8 years and then backed off. And then I was able to pass the baton to my parents.
What kept you going during your toughest times as a youth? What's kept you going?
I think trauma is an amazing tool, right? I think that a certain amount of trauma in everybody's life is super efficient for them to grow and to be resilient and to do that. And I've had several situations. I've probably had a lot more trauma than most in my early years. And that has been a space in which, yes, it's been a very hard roller coaster or a lot of a ride emotionally, mentally, physically, all those things. But my biggest aspect in which I've been very aware of is been the contrast of life, right? So, yes, have I had a lot of tough situations, have a lot of loss and abandonment and a lot of mistrust and all those things? Yes. But I also know that if I look in other directions, I can go here in LA and I can go downtown LA and there is a huge homeless problem, huge drug problem, and huge people that are in a debilitating, deteriorating life. I can look at my life and look at that, and that really puts me in a humble position and know that I've gotten through a lot with a lot of help and a lot of guidance and a lot of hands-on from you, whoever you believe in. But I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and I definitely, most definitely believe that His hands have been on me and have guided me through a lot of situations and brought me through in those types of things, it's that contrast of life. I'm always trying to, yes, in the moment, in my situation, I may not be happy. I may not want to go through this, but there could be always worse,
Mhm.
right? And it's temporary, right? Our current situations are temporary, they're not our final destinations. So that's something I try to hold on to, and it's been a work in progress constantly. As I've grown, I've become better at it, and I've become more self-aware at it, and be able to keep an even keel and not try to overstress and let my emotions run things. Those are the kind of key factors that have kept me going. And then also of honoring my parents, honoring things in which they stood for and what they sacrificed for me to just leave a good just be a good man and to just make an impact